In another galaxy, a planet called Pan was suddenly attacked by an unknown alien force. The aliens have the power to consume machines, buildings, and all living things. Everyone was ordered to evacuate the planet, but one man, Max Maverick, the captain of the army, refused to leave. Equipping his battlesuit, Max stood alone against this alien invasion, left with only his guns, his motorcycle, his hovercraft, and grim determination. Max Maverick is the Isolated Warrior. Isolated Warrior is an isometric auto-scrolling shoot-'em-up developed by Kid, which was released in 1991. Holding down the B button will cause Max to auto-fire his weapon, which is incredibly handy as there is really never a time where you'd want to stop shooting. Pressing the A button will cause Max to jump, which is also incredibly useful because it allows you to not only jump over chasms, but you can avoid ground-based enemies and their bullets while airborne. There is some nuance to jumping, as holding A for longer will cause Max to do a somersault. If you have enough bomb power, which is indicated by this bar in the bottom right corner of the screen, you can throw a salvo of bombs by jumping and pressing A again. If you throw bombs while somersaulting, the bombs and their explosions will spin, causing them to hit a broader area. There are lots of upgrades to collect in Isolated Warrior. These power-ups, which alternate between the letter L and W, will power up Max Maverick's weapon modes. The L power-up will upgrade the focusing weapon mode, which fires straight ahead and, as you upgrade it more and more, also fires directly behind. The focusing weapon eventually becomes extremely powerful, shooting 3 projectiles forward and causes tons of damage. The W power-ups power up the spreading weapon mode, which sacrifices the power of the focusing mode in favor of shooting in multiple directions. Pressing the select button will switch between the two modes on the fly, and I found myself doing this quite often depending on the challenges I was facing. Each of the weapon modes and your bomb power can be leveled up by collecting power-ups, maxing out at level 5. Isolated Warrior has a bit of variety to the stages, as sometimes you'll be mowing down enemies on foot, other times you'll be flying around with your hovercraft, and there's even a stage where Max is riding around on his motorcycle gunning down everything in sight, but the basic gameplay remains the same. One section I wanted to point out in particular is this one. You're walking along, happily blasting everything in sight, when suddenly the whole level begins to warp, which is an effect I don't think I've ever seen in another NES game. As I mentioned previously, Isolated Warrior was developed by a company called Kid, which stands for Kindle, Imagine, Develop. They would later go on to develop a game called Kickmaster, which released a year later in 1992. Kickmaster is a game I've reviewed previously, and one which I include in my list of hidden gems for the NES, and I mention this because Kickmaster and Isolated Warrior have a few things in common. Both games feature some really cool and memorable boss fights. You'll need to take down this huge flying fortress alien, a gruesome looking floating alien head that tears itself apart when you defeat it, a boss fight where you're constantly being pushed backward and forward through a corridor filled with deadly lasers, and the final boss, where you'll find yourself dodging a ridiculous amount of projectiles while also attempting to dodge massive missile barrages being fired from afar. Isolated Warrior also has another thing in common with Kickmaster. It contains a tolerable but noticeable level of jankiness, which I personally don't mind and actually find kind of enjoyable. You may also notice quite a bit of sprite flickering and slowdown in certain sections when there's a lot going on the screen. I don't know if this is actually the case, but to me it feels like they were really pushing the limits of what the NES was capable of, which I admire. I am far from the world's biggest fan of shoot-'em-ups, but Isolated Warrior was a unique experience to me. It has a decent amount of challenge, and it was just plain fun blasting through hordes of alien creatures, and the cool boss fights were just the cherry on top. This may be a controversial score, but as someone who enjoys games with a bit of jank, I give Isolated Warrior an engaging 4 out of 5. Isolated Warrior is an isometric You may also notice quite a bit of sprite flickering and slowdown in certain sections when I don't think I've ever seen in an Use your words.